So here's a preview of what we're going to be talking about today. So for those unaware, the art market in particular has a new record-breaking sale on their hands. This time, it is courtesy of Frank Frazetta. This particular piece is unofficially known as Man Ape, and it recently sold through Heritage Auctions on September 12th, 2025, for a whopping $13.5 million. Now, probably some of the talking points I'm going to make in today's video are going to surprise a lot of you, because you guys know I'm pretty much classically trained in art, antiques, and collectibles. So pretty much I have an opinion that is on par with most experts in the trade, meaning a lot of us may have differing opinions on certain things, but we all think the same about particular collecting categories, particular pieces of art, particular antiques, and the like. So what I am going to say is probably going to surprise a lot of you. But one thing that I am most impressed about this sale, and I'm also pleased about, is this is really the first time that a comic artist slash fantasy artist is now getting top billing to the point where the overall fine art community is finally starting to recognize this individual's body of work. And I consider that to be very good for the world of comic art, and more in particular, fantasy art, which up until this point in time was not really taken seriously. Now, really, in all honesty, this shouldn't be that surprising, because back in 2019, another Frank Frazetta piece, more specifically, and I am going to risk the YouTube algorithm here because this piece does have a little bit of mild nudity in it. I am going to show it regardless. This particular piece right here, Egyptian Queen, also sold through Heritage Auctions for a record-breaking price at the time of $5.4 million. So Frank Frazetta art has been on the up and up for many years. And the one thing that I'm a little bit laughing about, at least under my breath, is the fact that for years, literally for decades, almost centuries, the fine art market has been controlled by a small group of academic elitists who are a little bit snobby to the point where they pretty much have turned up their nose towards any aspect of comic art slash fantasy art ever being on par with fine art. Now, like a lot of you, you're probably laughing at that statement because if you guys recall, literally just in November 2024, a banana duct taped to a wall sold for a whopping $6.2 million. I'm sure a lot of you remember the art installation Comedian that sold for a record sum at that particular point in time. Well, now it's very interesting because the fine art market has to deal with Frank Frazetta quickly becoming a household name. There's a lot of people that are pretty much chasing after his works, willing to pay record sums for them at this particular point. And of course, if you don't know who Frank Frazetta is, just think of Conan. Conan the Barbarian is really all you need to know to get a proper assessment of Frank Frazetta's body of work. That's really what made him famous. Now, I'm sure there's a lot of you out there. I don't know what you were expecting in this video, because I know I have people that watch this channel who are active in the fine art world. I have people that watch this channel who just collect Pokemon cards. I have people that watch this channel that pretty much straddle the entire antiques and collectibles trade. However, one thing that I will say, if you're not familiar with Frank Frazetta's work, and you pretty much just saw a picture of this piece, and somebody told you that it sold for $13.5 million, I'm sure some of you out there are probably thinking, well, gee, that looks very demonic. That looks a little satanic. I don't think I want to go anywhere near that particular piece. While others of you out there are probably looking at this going, my God, if I had all the money in the world, I would buy as many pieces of Frank Frazetta art I could. I would literally design a house around this crazy demonic artwork style. So where I'm getting at here is art is supposed to elicit an emotional response. There's an excellent quote that says, art is in the eye of the beholder, much like beauty. So like somebody like me, I spend a lot of time touring museums. I spend a lot of time going to art galleries and the like. I live in and around the Philadelphia area, which makes it very rewarding and also very interesting. And one thing that I will tell you, good art is supposed to elicit an emotional response, whether it be positive, whether it be negative. Now, there are certain pieces out there, even me, I look at them, I can recognize the talent, but they do nothing for me. And that's okay. I don't spite the artist because he failed to elicit an emotional response in me as a critic, as a casual critic of art, we'll say. That said, I also recognize that an artist can have talent without eliciting an emotional response in me. I am just one person. Art doesn't have to speak to every single person for it to have meaning. Now, for the record, I am a fan of this type of art. I consider it to be very talented. I consider it to be very desirable. I am also, though, a fan of course, if you watch this channel, I have a collection of very valuable vintage, high-grade comic books. So I do like comic art. I do like fantasy art. And of course, on the other end of the spectrum, I'm a huge fan of artists like Andy Warhol. And of course, classic famous artists like Picasso or Van Gogh or Rembrandt or Monet. I love all of their works as well. So I have varied tastes when it comes to art. Now, what's interesting about this piece is that it really looks to me like there are changing demographics that are coming in the market for high dollar amount artworks like this, where we have younger connoisseurs, younger consumers that look at this and say, you know what? I would rather have this Frank Frazetta piece for $13.5 million than a boring Picasso. Or I would much rather have this piece than 2 or 3 Warhols in my collection. So we kind of have a changing of the guard where I think younger collectors are coming into this market who have money and they're like, you know what? I don't want what my father liked or my grandfather liked. This here speaks to me more than any of those other pieces. Or they're looking at this market going, you know, somebody paid $6.2 million for a banana duct taped to a wall. I would rather have something that resonates with me. Something where, even if I just store this in a vault 200 feet underground and buy it as an investment, if I look at this knowing that I own it, it elicits an emotional response. That's all that I need. So I'm kind of glad that this sale sold for $13.5 million. And I honestly hope this becomes a trend because it's damn time people, specifically the snobby, sophisticated, elitist art critics out there, recognize that comic art and fantasy art has its place in the world of fine art. Now, I don't want to go off on a tangent here, but another market that is very interesting, I'm sure that you guys have all heard of, maybe you don't recognize any of his pieces, the artist known as Norman Rockwell. Norman Rockwell helped make Illustrator art a thing. You can actually look that up. Illustrator art has not and is not at present time being taken seriously by the fine art market as well. But there are pieces of Norman Rockwell's original paintings that have sold for millions of dollars. So it's going to be very interesting to see how this plays out. Are more fans, more investors of Frank Frazetta work, are they going to come out of the catacombs per se, pun intended, because of the way his art is structured, and pay more and more for these pieces? Will they continue to increase in value over time? Now, we are already seeing that. Like I said, in 2019, Egyptian Queen sold for $5.4 million through Heritage. Here we are, 2025, roughly 6 years later, and this particular piece, Man Ape, sold for $13.5 million. So I think that this is the start of a trend where there's a lot of extremely wealthy connoisseurs out there that are saying, you know what? I want this to be my top tier piece of art if I'm going to invest in this market. I don't want the stuff that's going crazy on the market, like buying bananas taped to a wall or Warhols or any of this other speculative stuff. So it's going to be interesting to see where we end up in another few years, or I should say another decade of this. If we chart these particular prices and the value of this artist's work, I honestly think it's going to continue to climb, because this is really what this market needs. It needs a series of record-breaking sales that keep escalating one after the other every several years, and now this thing is going to become a trend. Now, make no mistake, in conclusion here, this doesn't mean Frank Frazetta is going to be on par with like Van Gogh or Monet or Rembrandt, where some of those paintings sell for hundreds of millions of dollars or more. Obviously, 13.5 million is not on par with $100 million. So we have to put this in perspective. But this is a great start, and I'm very happy for the fact that someone out there was willing to take a chance and say, you know what? I'm going to pay the record price. I'm going to pay $13.5 million for this painting, and I'm going to shake up the fine art market. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. And more importantly, did you think that was going to be my opinion when I announced I was going to do a video on this? Because I will also be writing an article for Antiques and Auction News on this very sale. Thank you for watching, and if you are subscribed, I will see you in another upcoming video.